So my name is Martin Shaw, and I haven't travelled too far from here. I'm from Devon, and I grew up in a rather rough part of a place called Torquay. Some of you may know it. And I grew up in a house without a telly or a car or a phone. Now, when I was a little one, that seemed a bit of a drag, but it meant that there was a tremendous amount of space in my life for stories. And I don't mean necessarily fairy tales, but I mean the kind of stories when you're with your mates, when you go out into the woods and you find yourself naturally that kind of ebullient, bursting, myth-making self that we all have as kids, hopefully. So I've been invited today to talk a little bit about this big word, myth. Some of the discussions I've heard while I've been here about things like the myth of the British Empire, or the myth of capitalism. Now the truth is, when I hear the word myth being used in that context, I feel very upset. Because I think that kind of myth is what you could call a toxic mimic. It's a toxic mimic. So what I'm going to do now is narrow the field a little bit and talk about my interest in the word myth. For the last 20 years, I've been something called a wilderness rites-of-passage guide. And that means that every summer I go up to Snowdonia, and some of you there will know there's a mountain there called Cadair Idris. And if you spend a night on Cadair, they say you come down mad, dead, or a poet. So we go up for 4 days and nights without food to make absolutely sure. So it's a rite of passage. And over the years, I've gone up there a lot with at-risk teenagers. I've gone up there with the heads of corporations. I've gone up there with a lot of different type of people, simply to the phrase I would use is to get dreamt again. In many tribal cultures all over the world, the notion was simply this. If you were going to get from that difficult transition of adolescence into being a young woman or a young man, you needed at least 2 major things in your quiver. You needed a profound knowledge of story. In other words, as the Celts say, stories are like what they call a swan feather cloak. So as you get older, you know the stories that tell you about the struggles and the epiphanies of your own life, that know about your griefs, your complexities, and your paradox, and you carry it into the disappointments you will certainly experience as you age. But to know the mythic ground you stand upon, and I mean that in a very unpretentious way, but to know the mythic ground you stand upon traditionally is seen as giving your psyche or your soul or whatever you want to call it a kind of resilience in the hard winds of the world. So that's one great thing to have. Secondly, is to have gone through some kind of opening to the wild, to nature. And as I was listening there to the inspirational talk about permaculture, I was feeling the tendrils of that relationship in what you were saying, and it cheered me up. So the traditional way of doing this is something like a wilderness fast. It's something like just as you were reaching the point, because I think adolescence has been tricky forever. I don't think it's suddenly got difficult in the last 20 years. So hundreds of thousands of years ago, just at that point where you cannot bear to be around your idiot brother for another second, or your mad father, you were plucked out and you were taken to the wild places or the deep forest or the mountain top, and you were shown something much greater and much deeper than just the human. And this is why I have such a bee in my bonnet about the way we use the word myth. Myth, in the way I think of it, is captured in this phrase. Myth is the power of a place speaking. Myth is the power of a place speaking. So in other words, it is no longer anthropocentric. It is no longer entirely human focused. So when you think of a place speaking, you're thinking about the people asleep in the hut. You're thinking about the badger snuffling about. You're thinking about the raven moving overhead. You're thinking about weather patterns. God damn it, you were thinking about a cosmos. You're thinking about a cosmos. we use this word universe. Do you know the etymology of the word universe? It simply means rolling along. Well, we have rolled along for quite a long time, and it's got us in the situation we're in now. A cosmos. How could that be? That you know you are connected to a wolf or a hawk or a waterfall. That is a powerful, deep thing. It's very hard to talk about in human language. But those are the kind of myths I'm interested in. Those are the kind of myths that seem to want me to tell them. So my work has been simply to get people out into the wild. Often I'm the last chance saloon before young men and women go to prison. And they say, look, you can either do a stretch or you've got this crazy guy in. Which do you want? And often they will choose Clink rather than coming out with myself. And, oy vey, you know. It used to be through this experience of what they call initiation. And initiation is a really big word, and it doesn't go away. I mean, here's a way to understand it for us sitting here in the West. What are the experiences that you've had in your life without which you couldn't be here in the shape you are today? What are those crossroads moments, and how were they marked in your life? You know, we know a little bit about leaving school, we know a little bit about getting laid, we know a bit about getting in our first fight, we know about that kind of stuff. But the deep soul journey that one way or another we are going to go through, how is that marked? So it used to be the point of these initiations that I'm describing, these tribal initiations, were to do two things. So you've grown up to about 12 or 13 and you were fully versed in what you could call the intelligence of the tribe, the intelligence of the village. In other words, you know about your mum and dad's function. You know how the village works. You know about the proud cattle in the field. You know how that stuff works. But the notion was, at that point, you need to get out of that and be broken open into what I would call prophetic information. And that's the information of the wild. And it's just something that comes, it's a hard thing to articulate, but you would bring it back into your community. Everyone else has done it, so they know you're coming back, they're excited, they're dancing, they're blessing you, they're praising you. And in some way, what you had gone through is confirmed and widens the soul of the tribe. Now the thing is, one way or another, you and I are going to go through those experiences anyway. The trouble is, we come back to a culture that, I can't even call it a culture, let's call it a mass civilization that has amnesia or active hostility to that experience. And that means that that despair and that depression I talked about, where is your swan feather cloak? Where is the mythic ground you stand upon? That is a hard thing to roll around in and to come to terms with. So my work is really, I run something called the Westcountry School of Myth and Story, and it's on Dartmoor, down where I live, and also in other places as well, but we'll concentrate on that. And I run year programs on what I call myth telling. You know, if I asked you, are you interested in storytelling? The truth is, there are probably a few of you that actually are interested in the vocal business of how do you do it and how do you keep people's attention. But what I've noticed being around tribal culture is the telling isn't the important bit, it's the carrying. So you have story carriers rather than tellers. Now there is no one at this festival or within a 50-mile radius of here that isn't carrying their own story. And I've got to be honest with you, I don't care what that looks like. I don't care if it's told in the way I would told a story. All I do care about is it has a little bit of style to it, a little bit of swagger, a little bit of something. That matters to me, because I believe it matters to the old gods. And we've been grievously rude to them for a long time. And if this is the end of time, and I don't want to believe it is, I think we should take hope where hope is due. But if we are on our way out, then I believe this is a love affair that we have grievously abused. And we simply, as a gesture, as what I call dark chivalry, we need to make as good a bed as we can before we go. So, can I tell you a story? Now, do not hear a story and think it your duty not to tell it. Do not hear a story and think it your duty not to tell it. One of the things I'm very interested in is the difference between what you call oral cultures and literature. Both are interesting. But I'm going to tell a story, I'm going to go through it, and what I ask is just see at some point in the next couple of days if you can remember it, and if you want to, draw it on a piece of paper. There'll be 4 or 5 major scenes, but don't put it into syntax, don't put it into sentences. As soon as you've done that, you'll become self-conscious. But if you just work with the images in it, I think you'll find it interesting. So, people say, what stories do we need now? We are not living in a Zeus time anymore. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear we're living in a goddess time, particularly at the moment. What I think we are living in is a trickster moment. So this is a story with a lot of trickster in it. Once upon a time, it was an early summer's morning, and there was a great forest, a forest extending out into all of the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. A young hunter is on his horse. Now, this isn't the kind of horse you see much in this world anymore. This isn't some scrawny little thing. This is a Castilian steed. This is a horse with strong shoulders, swishing tail, fierce eyes. The kind of horse, when you look at it, its eyes seem 1,000 years old. You know, that kind of horse. Now, this young guy is making his way into the forest. He has very, very little, and he has become an extremely skilled hunter. And because he's a hunter, he notices it's got extremely quiet in the forest. And at a certain curve in the lane, he sees why. Blocking the young dude's path is an enormous feather. They say, and say truly, this feather was so big, it was as long as a swan's wing and as wide as an eagle's. And that's just a freaking feather. And it was a kind of orange and dark red, and there were sparks coming from it. It was clear that this was a feather from the Firebird herself. Man! Well, the hunter had heard about things like this, but he couldn't believe it was true. He was about to get off his horse, and the horse spoke to him. We have no evidence that the horse has ever spoken to him before. So maybe we've got to get in these situations. The Irish call it the right kind of trouble. He's in the right kind of trouble. The horse speaks to him and says this: do not pick up that feather. If you pick up that feather, you will come to know the meaning of trouble and the meaning of fear. Well, being a young hunter, he knew a little bit about trouble and he knew a lot about fear, and he did not want to get any more reacquainted with it than that. Do you remember in your life when you had a feather like that in front of you? And I got to ask you, did you pick it up or did you go some other way? So he's, you know what it's like when these big things, an idea forms. I don't think, he thinks, I'm not ready to pick up that feather. If I take that feather, it's going to blow my mind. I can't go near that feather. But I happen to know down the road there's a king. Now, he's a good anarchist, so he's not into kings particularly. But he does think to himself, this would be a good feather for a king. This is a fairy tale after all. And all these characters are living within you. They're warring impulses inside yourself. Well, I could pick up the feather, I could take it to the king, and maybe he would reward me. Maybe he would raise me in rank. Oy vey, says the horse. Picks up the feather, clop, 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 clop. Takes it to the castle. The castle, the gate, the guards let him in, and before you know it, he is in front of that king. And the king welcomes him, and he inspects the feather. And he kind of holds it up to the light. And you know, they say it was as if 1,000 candles had been lit. The room was aglow. And the king thanks him and he says, well, thank you for this gift, I appreciate it, but, this is not really a gift fit for a king, is it? Now this is the problem when you get involved with kings. This is not a gift fit for a king. Now, had you brought me the bird herself, resplendent with those wings as if they were burnished in fire, had you brought me her, man, your life could be very different. You know, I'd get you a bit of land, I'd get you a cottage, there would be linen on your back, it would be a good look for you, young man. Let me think. 24 hours. Get me the bird herself, preferably in some sort of ornate cage, and your life will get better. And if you don't, my knife will slice through your throat like a hot knife through butter. Capiche? Capiche is an ancient Gaelic word. And he said, yeah, you're right, capiche. So he staggers out, and he is weeping the kind of tears you and I will weep maybe once or twice in our life. And the horse looks at him with those ancient eyes and with utter compassion says, I told you so. I told you so. When you get into the business of sovereignty and kings and queens, you're going to find fear and you're going to find trouble. But don't weep now, the trouble is before you. You go back to that king and with as much swagger and panache, underused, another underused word, panache as you possibly can, tell him you can do it. Tell him this isn't a problem for the likes of you. You just need 100 bags of grain and 3 cords of rope. And do it with a little, all right, I'll try it. So he comes in, a bit camp, and he says, of course I could do this thing. How ridiculous. You want the Firebird in 24 hours? That's not a big thing for me. I just need 100 bags of grain and I need 3 things of rope. And the king says, all right, they're yours. So he gets his cords of rope, he gets his grain. Now, picture the scene if you can. There is the castle, there is the forest, and between them is a meadow. In the middle of the meadow is a hollow tree. Now, the horse, who's still talking, says, cut open the 100 bags of grain. So they do it, and the horse starts to eat them. And he says, that's not why I got you the grain. He says, yeah, just let me have a bit. He says, this is the scene. This is what's going to happen. At dawn, that great, magnificent Firebird will fly through the wood. She will see the offering of grain, and she will see it as a gesture of beauty in a damaged world. She will see it as a magnificent gesture of beauty. So she will come down and start to eat it. At that point, I will come out and with my big horse hoof, clonk, I'll put it on one wing. You run out with the rope with the other, tie her up, we'll stick her in a cage, bring her back to the king, bish bash bosh, job done. He says, well, I kind of feel sorry for the Firebird. He said, forget about it. Your life's on the line. But you have to spend a night in a hollow tree first. I don't know if any of you have ever spent a night in a hollow tree. Maybe you have. I think you have. Some of you, anyway. You're looking suitably harrowed. It is a hard gig, a night in a hollow tree. It is a hard gig. You're in there, it's very cold. Nothing happens between the hours of 1 and 5. Tick-tock, tick-tock. You step out of clock time altogether. And he's just got this one little hole and he's looking out and waiting. You're just desperate for the sky to change colour. You know that feeling? Jesus, this is ever going to be over. And gradually the first little pinks came up and the first purples. There she is. The magnificent, the Firebird herself, and she lands and she starts to eat, and so absorbed is she in her eating, she barely notices when the horse comes out and leans on one wing and he comes out with the rope. In fact, some will say it was as if she knew this was going to happen and it wasn't even a big deal. She just sort of rolled over, let herself get tied up, more will be revealed on that, and dragged back to the king in the box. Well, the king comes down in his pajamas, and little king designed pajamas, but he can't believe this has fucking happened. He's probably been sending boys out for years to achieve this kind of thing, and then one has finally pulled it off. And he says, well, you did it. And there's the Firebird, and there's the cage. Wow, I'm going to keep you around. I'm going to keep you around. So, yeah, what did you want? Linen on your back? You want a little piece of ground to do a bit of growing? You want a cottage? You've got it. But you can help me on a deeper issue. Is this ever going to end? Once you get in the business of the king, you're in trouble. Well, what now? And the king looks pained in his pajamas and the early morning light coming through the window. And he says, you may or may not have noticed, but I do not have a wife. And when a kingdom doesn't have a queen, when it doesn't have a female sovereign, everything is out of balance. The crops don't grow, the salmon don't leap from the river, nothing, it's all off. It's like an out of tune note. And he says, some say I'm an idiot, but I'm not enough of an idiot to know that I need to get hitched. I need to get married. This thing needs to figure itself out. But being a king, not any woman will do. I will only marry one woman, and her name is Vasilisa. And some circles, when her Vasilisa's name is being mentioned, it's quite appropriate for a kind of sigh to go through the room. So you just let that happen if you need to. Vasilisa, that's good, yeah.
Can I hear the sigh?
Oh, that was reasonable. Now, so there is a woman that lives at the very edge of the world. That's where Vasilisa is. She is not easy to find. Vasilisa lives across 9 lands and 9 oceans on a very deep water, on a little coracle, a little boat. Now, I don't know how you're going to do it, young man, but you have to get to Vasilisa. You have to convince her to come back, where we will get married. And if you do not pull this off, then let me think. We will attach 4 wild horses to this arm, this leg, and we will set them off in 4 different directions, north, south, east, and west. Am I making myself absolutely clear? He says, yes, absolutely clear. Can I speak to my horse, please? So he goes out and he's weeping, man. He's just weeping buckets to his horse. And the horse says again, don't weep now, the trouble is before you. Go back, tell him you can do it, tell him it's not a problem, but this is what you need. You need 1 Arabian Bedouin tent. You need tapestries of all the great love stories through all the ages. You need the finest foods, the most exotic fragrances. You need musical instruments. You need Persian rugs. You need books of poetry. So that means you need Pablo Neruda. You need Hafez. You need Rilke. You need Emily Dickinson. Maybe even a push Mary Oliver. You need a lot of poetry. In fact, you need to prepare a kind of swag bag of beauty, so utterly overwhelming that it will defend your case when the moment really comes. So it says, all right, I've got the poetry, I've got the Bedouin tent, I've got the clicks, you know, it's on this little checklist. I've got the tapestries of all the romances. Goes back, the king says, I have all this isn't a problem for me. And so the 2 of them set off. We've got the hunter, we've got the horse, we've got this tremendous bag of beauty that they carry behind them, their swan feather cloak, really. Now, if I told you all the things that happened to them over those 9 days and across those 9 lands, it would take too long. Maybe in our life, to get to the woman at the edge of the world, it takes us 30 years. I don't know. What I can tell you is finally they arrived. Older, wiser, but they're there. The moment they were on that beach, they get that Bedouin tent up, they put the tapestries out, they lay the floor, they start to cook. Did I tell you the young man was a phenomenal cook? And even a vegan option if you absolutely have to. But I have to tell you, there was a little bit of lamb tangine going on. So, anyway, it's all being prepared. Now, Vasilisa, on her coracle, Vasilisa, you've got to understand, you're talking about a woman, but what stands behind her is a divinity. She has gone up and down and up and down that stretch of water for, I reckon, 1,000 years. And she's never seen nothing of interest on the beach. Now suddenly, there's this Bedouin tent, these Persian rugs, these tapestries with these great shimmering love stories. There's the smell of food being prepared, there is music being played, and well, all I'm saying is that she let her little coracle boat she's a very sophisticated piece of work, so she goes slowly, till finally, somehow, almost by accident, she finds herself on the beach, and she just sort of wanders around. She doesn't go straight over, she's just checking it all out, you know. And so he's playing his music and the food is prepared, and he's got some words in his chest, but nothing could have prepared him for when he saw her. So over a time, she comes and sits down next to him, and he sits there too, and he gets this great bit of eloquence. He says, "Madam, let our speech be the feast." And then he can't think of anything to say. In the way of boys all over the world for all time. We start well, but then he crashes. He thinks, bollocks. So he goes away and he's presenting the food, and it's as if he had read her mind. It's everything that she wants to eat. It's delicious, exquisite. The pudding is perfect. He happened to know that she liked brandy and cigars. She's having a great time. And finally the poetry came to him, and he said something like this: "In your bright braided tresses there is a flock of songbirds." Now this is true. She'd been out there for so long there were little birds living in her hair. "In your bright braided tresses there is a flock of songbirds, and your eyes are like keen crystal set in a ring. I like your lime white arm. Please place it around my lonely waist." She's been going up and down for a long time, but she's, more. Let's see if he can sustain the level of poetic eloquence. Eloquence was a big deal in these days. So then he sort of bigs himself up a bit, and he says, "Well, I would give away my silk from Persia, my gold from Peru, my lands from India," of which he has none, "were I to walk in the sweet forests of your smile, or to nuzzle the snowy mountains of your breast." When I saw you, and he meant this is the key to this stuff, you have to mean it, otherwise it's empty. "When I saw you, I thought the moon herself had fallen from the sky into a bed of wild flowers and was singing an old tune I had waited my whole life to hear. Je t'aime, je t'aime, je t'aime. You are the sky woman of the dawn. You are my blossoming branch. You are the bright pulse of my whole understanding." She said, "All right, I will have a cup of coffee." So the coffee came in too. And I don't know when in the evening it happened, but she got real comfortable and she fell asleep. And then he immediately tied her up, stuck her on the back of the horse, and headed off back towards the king. I've told this story many times and I'm still traumatized, but he's a young man. He will make amends. Across 9 lands, 9 oceans, she's tied up on the back of the horse. She is pissed! Talk to the hand, seriously. So she gets back, and out comes the king, and he's all his regalia and his fancy, and madam, so pleased you're here. So pleased you're here, and it's a wonderful thing. And she says, "Look, I do not appreciate your courting techniques. And if you were interested in me, why did you send that little chap to do it? With all his language and his beautiful music, and he got me stirring, and I felt vulnerable, and now I'm here with you. You idiot. You want to marry me? Let me tell you something. No woman should marry a man without a wedding dress, and in that wedding dress is sewn in the 100,000 secrets a woman needs from her grandmothers and her grandmothers before her to prepare them for the complexity of what we call a relationship." He says, "Yes, you do have a point." Well, where do you think my wedding dress is? It's across 9 lands and 9 oceans. At the bottom of the ocean, my coracle boat has been going round and round and round. The grandmothers have placed it under a rock. I hope your boy can swim, because the only one that I want to go and collect it is him. Well, this is no problem with me. Boy, come here. Now, I keep having to come up with threats for you, so here's the latest. We will put a red hot poker up your arse, and as you're dealing with that, we'll cut your head off, providing you can't get the wedding dress. Can you get the wedding dress? And he says, yes. Can I go and can I take my horse? Yes, you can. And off they go. Another long journey, more adventures, more trouble, but they get to the edge of the sea. And it is now that the hunter reveals, I can't swim. I just can't swim. And the horse started to sing. Again, we have no evidence to know if the horse had ever sung before. But it sang some ancient keening tune. It was so beautiful. It was the kind of sound that sung this world into life. And if you were to hear it, if I were to sing it, which I do know, all your hair would fall straight off your head. And judging by looking around at this festival, some people have heard that tune. The water started to move this way and that way. And gradually you first sort of started to see all these aquatic creatures coming up. You'd see a crab, or you'd see a little bit of a whale, or you'd see a sea lion, until suddenly all of the water was full of animals, sea animals. And they said, what do you want? And why are you singing with the old deep magics? And they said, we've got this situation. Is there really a wedding dress with 100,000 secrets sewn into it from the grandmothers at the bottom of a great rock at the bottom of the sea? And they said, yes, there is. Do you want us to get it? And they said, yes, you can. So down they went. They all went down in this great arcane flock. First of all, the water was blue, and then indigo, and then finally that deep black at the bottom of the sea. And they pushed, and they put their shoulder to that rock. They pushed it over, and then there was the wedding dress. Strange little detail. As it arrived on the shore, it was dry. It was perfect. It was ready. Wow. Well, the hunter and his horse thanked them. They stuck it on the back. They headed off as fast as they can. Now, the wedding has really been prepared. That hall, we have got people turning up from all over the place. We've got musicians, we've got dancers, we've got every kind of character you can imagine is turning up at a wedding like that. And he turns up with the wedding dress, and the queen, or the queen-to-be, looks at it and she says, yeah, that's mine. That's the one. I can see those secrets. King, I have one final request before I marry you. And he's high maintenance. What do you want now? And she says, you know, the man that came and got me in the first place and has just brought my dress. And he says, yes. I would like you to prepare a cauldron. Heat the cauldron up, wait till it is white hot. It has to be very deep, this cauldron. And then I'd like you to throw him in. And the king said, I have no problem with that. I think he's served his purpose. All right. So the young hunter is taking in the scene, and he says to the king, okay, can I go and speak to my horse? And the king said, be my guest. So he goes out and he starts to weep again, and the horse looks at him and says, weep now. Weep now. You're fucked. Weep now. The trouble has arrived. I have one final piece of advice for you. He says, I'm listening. Believe me, I'm listening. When it's your death you're facing, when it's not Mickey Mouse stuff anymore, when it is your death you are facing, when they come to get you, when they reach to grab you down and haul you into that cauldron, don't wait to be dragged. Don't try plea bargaining. Don't give them a poem. Run towards it. You run towards it. Now I tell you, there are people you know in that room. Do not look left, do not look right, do not look above or below. Head straight for that cauldron, and when you get there, jump with all the juju in your bones, with all the mojo you have, with all your fierce, arcing, jaguar spirit. You fucking jump into that thing. Do you get me? Yeah. Thanks, horse. You've been a great companion these many years. Man, that was a long-ass walk he took. And they're all in there, and you are seeing it now. Everyone you've known, all the teachers you've hated, the lovers you've had, the ones you've fallen out with, the ones you've made up with, the ones you can't let go of, everybody that stands behind you now, they're all in that room looking at you. They're all there. And the hunter ran and ran, and he did not look left, and he did not look right, and he did not look above, and he did not look below, and he jumped up. Some say he even did a little pirouette. Bang! Disappeared. Nothing happens. 10 minutes pass. 15 minutes pass. Just the occasional bubble. Until finally, just when everybody had given up on anything happening, a hand reached the side, and he stood up. And they say he looked as if he had been burnished in gold. He looked as if he had been burnished in gold. He looked great. He looked older, wiser, but it was a good look. It suited him. And the king noticed, and the king said, "God damn it." He said, "If that little prick looks that good, having jumped in that cauldron, how good do you think I'm going to look as the king if I do?" Everyone out of the way. Out of the way. I smite your right. Ah! Into the pool he went. Splosh. And he was never seen again. That is until they drained the thing, and this shriveled little character was in the water. Well, watching all of this were some Irish musicians. And they said, and forgive me for this accent, I thought there was going to be a wedding, but somebody's got to pay, and I reckon those two are falling in love with each other. Why don't we just get the people together that really need to get together? Because truly, Vasilisa and the young hunter, who now looked older, they say he carried a limp for the rest of his life. There was a sweetness going on there, and there was some forgiveness, and there were some conversations, and indeed, the true wedding was happening. These are not figures out in the world. These are things going on inside us all of the time. And so a real wedding was prepared, and there were musicians, and there were artists, and as I always say, Johnny Cash came. Johnny Cash ran the Sweat Lodge. Joe Strummer and the Dubliners played for 14 hours. There was Leonard Cohen, there was Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell got involved, but only played Court and Spark and Blue and none of her difficult jazz albums. There was a great feeling. In the men's loos, a window was broken open, and let us see who crawled through that window. There was, who do you think was there?
Hendrix!
Hendrix was there, Elvis was there. Was Janis Joplin with them? No Janis.
No, Jesus was.
Jesus was there, briefly put in an appearance. Anyone else? Who else was at the wedding?
Beethoven.
The Pogues. Tom Waits. Yes, I heard it. Tom Waits was there, definitely.
Beethoven.
As the Irish say, all were in radiant contentment. All were in radiant contentment. It was always in radiant contentment. Do you know why we always have these big weddings at the end of a story? Not because it is corny, not because it is a cliche, but within our life, as we get older, we send many parts of ourselves out into exile. And the point of these big bloody weddings at the end of stories is to take all the parts of you that have got exiled and invite them back to the table. That's what this whole round table business with Arthur is about. Some of us have a lot of empty places at that table, so invite them back, invite them back, invite them back. And if you had been at that wedding and you had seen Hendrix jamming with the Pogues and Tom Jones and Nina Simone and Simone de Beauvoir and all the others, you would have seen dancing In the middle of them all, the Firebird herself, who was set free from her cage and flew out, and they say, even to this day, if you go out at dawn in that part of the world, you will hear. And as to what happened to Vasilisa and the young hunter, that is all I know. Thank you very much.
Bless you.
So look, these are the kind of stories we need. These stories are about where our life meets these stories. They're full of paradox, they're full of challenge, they're full of all of this good stuff. Come and see us at the School of Myth. Come and have a look at us on the internet. We're just down the road. But more than anything, bless you. Thank you for coming. Live long and prosper. Bye-bye.
Yes, people, with all your juju, with all your mojo, Martin Shaw!